a very good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines, of course, your host. And tonight's program, we are going to be dealing with probably what is the biggest issue in the news, and that is the standoff within the People's National Congress as regards the position of the leader of the opposition and the position of representative of the list. I don't need to introduce you to the issue because it has been all over the news, and we are going to try to walk our way through it tonight on this program to kind of isolate what are the real issues and how we think the way in which it's being handled would affect the People's National Congress and the opposition going forward. So that's where we are going to stop tonight. And I want to welcome everyone who is with us very early. And so ask you to spread the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. We have a sterling panel tonight, and they're going to be on shortly. Audriana Thomas, Adam Harris, and Dr. Henry Jeffrey, who are going to help us to walk through this issue. So they'll be on in about a few minutes. As we come on tonight, we learned that GCOM has fired the personal assistant of former CEO, Mr. Lowenfield. Mr. Lowenfield's CEO was fired from GCOM on the charge that he deleted information from his computer, what they call GCOM information. And so he was fired, and the matter was raised today at the meeting of the GCOM commissioners, and Vincent Alexander walked out of the meeting in protest. So we have another story building up there. We were trying to get Vincent to come on this afternoon to give us a report, but we're going to try to get him tomorrow night since he has a meeting going on at this time. But suffice to say, we're at it with GCOM again. GCOM staff was fired. The staff was the personal assistant to Mr. Keith Lowenfield, and he was fired today ostensibly for deleting information from his computer. Vincent Alexander walked out of the meeting and pointing out that GCOM's information is not stored on the young man's computer, and suggesting that the witch hunt continues at GCOM. So we're going to be following that story, and tomorrow we hope to have Mr. Vincent Alexander on to break it down for us. A lot has been happening, you know. I got a call a few days ago in which it was related to me that residents of West Berbice who had applied for flood relief had gotten a call to go uplift their checks. And when they thought they were going to the Ministry of Agriculture, They were instead asked to go to Freedom House at Bath Settlement on West Berbice. And that's where they went to collect their flood relief. This is flood relief that people apply to through the Ministry of Agriculture. But when they were called to collect the flood relief, they were not required to go to the ministry. They had to go to the PPP's party headquarters at Bath Settlement. There is called Freedom House there in Bath Settlement. So we just want to alert you to that. And the same Ministry of Agriculture, someone sent me today a video in which the government is launching an entrepreneurship program through the Ministry of Agriculture, again, through the Ministry of Agriculture. And they put out an advertisement. But lo and behold, there we go, the Agriculture and Innovation Entrepreneurship Program. And I must say this program was designed by a professor at the University of Guyana. And it was first submitted to the APNU AFC government before they left office because of the no confidence votes. They were not able to launch the program. The PPP came in, met the program there, and they've now launched the program, but they've given no credit whatsoever to the person who designed the program, a lecturer at the University of Guyana. But what is more, what caught my attention with this flyer, or whatever they call it, advertisement, was that it started with a song in Hindi, and then it was followed by an English version of the song. Again, this is the Ministry of Agriculture launching a program starting with Hindi and then English followed. Now, this is not the Mahasabha or even the PPP as a party that is launching. This is the government of Guyana through the Agriculture Ministry, as you're seeing there. And they see it fit to introduce an advertisement in Hindi and then followed up by English. No, like I said, I don't see anything wrong with a Hindu or an Indian Guyanese organization using a song in Hindi to introduce its advertisement. But the government of Guyana, in my opinion, has to remain true to protocol. English is the official language of Guyana. And I suppose if you want to highlight the 6 races, you'll have to do the song in Hindi and Swahili and Chinese and Portuguese and Arawak, so that all the ethnic groups, Muslim, all the ethnic groups will be represented. But the government of Guyana starts out a government advertisement in Hindi, followed by English. See, this is what we are talking about. The government is busy labeling opposition supporters as racist. This program, all the other programs, we are spewing racism. But you see where the racism is coming from. If you start a government advertisement in Hindi, then you are really projecting the primacy of one ethnic group. Some will argue you're projecting the supremacy of one ethnic group. And that is a definition of racism. Certainly one of the definitions of racism, that is your belief that one race, your ethnicity is superior to others. And I've always argued that those of us who they accuse of racism have I've never heard any of people on the opposition side arguing that African Guyanese are superior to other ethnic groups. In fact, African Guyanese advocates are sometimes criticized for being too inclusive in their advocacy, but yet they are the ones who are called racist. And here you have a party that is in government, that is using the government to advance the supremacy or the primacy of one ethnic group. So we just want to draw these things to your attention. I've always argued that people who themselves advocate racism are the ones who do not want a conversation on race. Because if you have a conversation on race, the populace becomes more racially aware and they're able to detect racism when they see it. So I'm going to ask the operator to play the advertisement so that you can hear it. I was hoping to play it during the break. I still play it on break, but I will play it now and play it again. So Mr. Operator, if you can play the advertisement so that the audience knows that we're not lying. As we await the operator queuing up there, tonight's program, of course, is going to be on the impasse that is developing within the PNC on whether Mr. Norton should assume the position of leader of the opposition and representative of the list. We're going to be talking to our panel in a few minutes. On that, they're all ready to go. Adam Harris, Henry Jeffrey, Audriana Thomas. If the operator is ready to play that video for us that I was talking about a few moments ago. But it seems as though our operator is not ready with that video yet, so we're going to keep moving on. Let me introduce our guests tonight. As I said, Audriana Thomas, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, and Adam Harris. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101. It doesn't seem that the operator has them queued up either. I don't know what is happening there backstage. I think the operator is saying that his computer has frozen. So yes, there's a technical problem there. But as you know, today the leader of the PNC met with the Commonwealth Secretary General who's visiting Guyana, and the leader of the opposition, or the office of the leader of the opposition, met with her. Significantly, Mr. Harmon was not present at that meeting. He had another event, but Roysdale Ford deputized for him. So there is some stuff happening there. But yes, as I said earlier, residents of West Berbice had applied for flood relief through the Ministry of Agriculture, and when they were called to collect their flood relief, they were directed to go to the PPP headquarters in Bath Settlement, Freedom House in Bath Settlement. Now, these are the people who would remind us that in the 1970s, the PNC practiced paramountcy of the party, in which the party was superior to the government. And this is a clear instance of paramountcy of the party, where the party is the headquarters for government business. Paramountcy of the party. And the PPP was loud in its condemnation of paramountcy under the PNC 40 years ago. And today, it is practicing the same thing. We see the paramountcy of Hindi now. Government advertisement, Hindi, a song in Hindi is played before the national language, which is English. All people say, I will meet where we go. I will meet where we go. The domination that Dr. Henry Jeffrey for years has been writing about is very clear for everyone to see. The PPP intends to continue its march down the road of domination of the society, domination of the country's politics, domination of the government, domination of the state. It's quite a thing. And that is why they want to shut us up, because they do not want us. They do not want us to be able to speak about these things. They do not want us to speak about these things. They do not want us to expose their political and ethnic domination. And that is why they are trying so hard to shut us down, so that what they're doing can go undetected. But we're going to continue to expose who the real practitioners of racism are, who the real practitioners of racism are, and to point out how they're being barefaced about what they're doing. In case you're just joining us, yes, it's politics 101. I'm waiting on my operator to sort out some technical problems so that we can have our guests ready. So let's bring in our guests, Adriana Thomas, who is a consultant, former PRO at Gaisuko, who was one of the casualties, early casualties, when the government took office and they began to fire people left, right, and center. Adriana was one of the first persons that got fired. Welcome, Adriana. Adam Harris was no stranger, doesn't need any introduction. And Dr. Henry Jeffrey, who also doesn't need any introduction to this program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101.
Good evening, Dr. Hines, and thank you for inviting me and to my other two colleagues, Adam and Dr. Jeffrey. Hello. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Oh, the same to you. The same to everybody.
Thank you. I hope you're staying safe and healthy.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's start with the political scientists here to try to make sense of what we're dealing with. Dr. Jeffrey, this impasse over who becomes the leader of the opposition in parliament, are you surprised that it has come to this?
Thank you very much again for your invitation, David. And of course I am. I'm astonished, as a matter of fact, because I cannot believe that Mr. Harmon and maybe also Mr. Granger can be doing anything like this. Maybe they are seeing something I'm not seeing, because this cannot help their political career in the future. Every position they have held in the ACNU has been the result of their position in the PNC. Now the PNC has spoken, and they are saying they got a law and order. These gentlemen should really have just said, we have lost this little battle we had, and we'll fight another day, and we resign gracefully from this position, send a resignation. If the party PNCR wants to accept it, they will. And if they do not, they will not. This should never get to this stage. I am yet to see how this can benefit them in the long run, particularly Mr. Harmon, because he still could be in the game. Mr. Granger has played his card, and his cards are gone. There's no more David Granger. The question is, how could this possibly benefit? I don't know. Maybe he sees something I don't see. But effectively, yes, I am not only surprised, but I am astonished that this has really happened. We are allowing ourselves to fall for formalism, and the PPP must love this. I have argued numerous times on your show the last time. I argued that in a Westminster type system, Parliament is nothing for the opposition. It is a place that we were taught to believe is something, but it is absolutely nothing. We see this with the Natural Resource Fund bill. The PPP just walk in there and says, well, we're going to do it. We go on, see, it doesn't matter. Take a walk. The bill is passed. You make all the ruckus. Now you're saying you're going to court. It demonstrates that for the opposition, Parliament is nothing, particularly in an ethnically divided country such as ours, where we have ethnic parties in both opposition and government. They are essentially ethnic parties with one seat majority, believe that they can rule the world. And I think that it could be that you can provide a position that when you are, where you are at, you just mentioned all these things about going to Freedom House to collect money for flood relief or whatsoever relief and all of those things. Essentially, where you are at is that these two ethnic groups that have been at loggerheads forever are now coming again, or even in a worse state, a more intense state, to a state where there's going to be confrontation. There is no doubt about it. If you look at what has happened in the elections, the PNC cannot go to the elections with the same list. How are they going to get it changed? How? You think the PPP already have people saying, oh, we can continue with the continuous registration we have always had, and all of the observer groups have said that this list is no good and needs to be changed fundamentally. You need a new list. You need to go house to house and do registration. You need to do it biometrics. Some people say, oh, the PNC and the PPP got lots of people on the list. Well, take them off. Take them off. But to do that, you have to have a new list. Now, since I do not believe that the PPP would easily stand for that, how would the PNC go about doing this? How would they get them to do this? How? This is a confrontation of sorts. Parliament can't help you with that. You can talk as much as you like in Parliament. They will go with a one-seat majority and say, oh, we passed it. This is what we'll have. Parliament cannot help you. Since 2004, I was Minister of Education. I wrote, because the PNC was up to the same thing after Desmond Hoyt went, had its constitutional reform, but we were still fighting because we have a majoritarian system in place. The Carter Center again stated in their report, this is the problem, the majoritarian system. And unless we get there, we start to deal with this, we are not going to get anywhere. Even when the ethnic balance or the ethnic shifts seems to be able to say, oh, because make all the major groups a minority, guess what they are doing? The parties are running now to rig the election to get over the 50% line. They are not even allowing the natural process to bring us a state that might be a bit better, because it's not going to be that much better. Because if you have the PPP come to government and can have a, say, Anog or whatever, with 2-1 seat or something, joining with them to keep the old PNC out, I mean, how much better is that? But at least it keeps the PPP from, or the PNC in the matter, if they gain the majority of some sort, because they have an ethnic group, not race. People usually speak to race that in black people, 29% of the population. But in terms of 29% of the population, if the question is most of the mixed people are black, ethnically black.
Yeah.
And it brings you up to say, this is nonsensical, but they want to disillusion people with this view. And that is why you need another kind of party or organization. Therefore, I think that the trick here with Mr. Harmon and Mr. Norton was for them to talk and say, where are we going? Because these are major problems I'm talking about here. This is not a high problem. They can't go to election with the same list, or else people will hang them and then say they lose. So effectively, they got to get the list changed.
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
Yes, they must know a battle up ahead. They must know. The question now is, how are we going to organize for that battle?
Yeah. And let me just confirm your initial observation as someone who was part of the APNU AFC process as a representative of the WPA. No position in the APNU was ever put up for elections. Positions were given to parties, and the parties would fill that position. if Mr. Granger was a WPA member, he would never be presidential candidate. He was presidential candidate because he was the leader of the big party. The candidacy was given to a big party, and the big party named him. So this thing that the APNU has to discuss, the APNU never discuss those matters. They said, look, in 2011, they said the presidential candidate go to the big party, and the prime ministerial candidate go to the WPA. WPA said, Rupert PNC said, Granger. and that's all things. The general secretary of the APNU was proposed by Mr. Granger. He brought it. Nobody would argue because the big party always take the big spoils. These things were never elected. I just wanted to put that on the table very, very early and to say that this matter is not a legal matter. This matter is a matter of political parties. Agree on you gonna get number one, I gonna get number two. When the AFC, when the PNC wanted Nagamutu in 2020, they didn't want Ramchetan. AFC said, no, you give us the number two position in the Commonsburg Accord, and we will fit, not you. And when they were sharing out the seats after the election, the WPA said, this is the person we want. Mr. Granger decided, no, you can't pick who you want. I can pick for you. WPA walked on that. Because the understanding is that each party pick its representative. Having said that, Adriana, let me bring you in and put the same question to you. Are you surprised that the PNC has allowed this thing to reach the stage it has?
I'm surprised, Dr. Hines, that Mr. David Granger and Mr. Joseph Harmon does not have the maturity to resign and make way for the new leader. I'm going to get straight to the point. I have spent the past 4 years, I've served on an international organization from 2016 as the chairman of a subcommittee, the Change Management Subcommittee, or the Fit for Purpose Subcommittee. That was from 2016 to 2020. The organization was going through a whole reorganization. At the same time, I was at Gaisuko, and Gaisuko, I was sort of coordinating the change management process at Gaisuko. The point I'm making is change is difficult, but change has to be managed. And so I have seen from those experiences, it was very difficult going through the change. People had to give up positions. You had to, people have to be prepared to do that, but change has to be managed. So I'm surprised that Mr. David Granger and Mr. Joseph Harmon does not have the, or do not rather, have the maturity to resign and let the new leader of the PNC take up the position. And I'll tell you what, I've worked for a very long time in organizational behavior, societal behavior. And I read Freddie Kisun's article sometime this week, and Freddie was saying this is going to go on way into the 2025 elections. Freddie is right. This could go on all the way to 2025 if it is not addressed. The other point that I'd like to make is that I hear Dr. Jeffrey, what he's saying in terms of all of the other things which should happen in terms of the list, having a new list and all of that. But I would like to address 4 areas tonight. 1, change and change management. 2, problem solving and making tough decisions. 3, the APNU and AFC partnership and the transition plan. I've actually put together a draft transition plan to propose to the leader of the PNC and the as well as the central executive. So we're going to get to that point where I propose that plan. And I am taking a very tough position here and bold position, because nothing just happens, Dr. Hines. Aubrey Norton cannot sit there and think that Joseph Harmon is going to come and say, "Oh, Aubrey, you know, we've always been part of the same party, and I'm going to give up this leader of opposition position, and I'm going to give up my seat in parliament." Neither should he expect that David Granger is going to say that I'm going to give up as the head of the list. However, I think Mr. Norton has to change goes through 3 stages. The first stage is the current state. The second stage is the transition state. The third stage is the future state. Where all the PNC is at this point, they're at the current state.
Right. And Adriana, we'll come back to that a little later on. Let me get Adam in here for his initial thoughts. The same question that I've put to you and Dr. Jeffrey. Adam, you are probably the insider among us here. Are you surprised that your party has allowed this thing to get to where it is?
No, I'm not surprised. To begin with, the initial talk was, look, the leader of the opposition might be a member of the PNC, but he wasn't put there by the PNC. That's the big argument. And if you remembered rightly, David Granger, when he walked aside, he nominated Joseph Harmon. So Harmon became the leader of the opposition. It wasn't done at the party level, at APNU level, or anything. Having said that, Aubrey Norton has a very good case in saying, look, as the leader of the party with the largest bloc in the APNU, I should have a say. And my say is that I should be the leader of the opposition, as was the case with Mr. Granger. We now come to the point where some people are saying, hey, you're the leader of the party, you want to be leader of the opposition, you're creating a condition for maximum leader, total control. Not that I see anything wrong with total control, but that's the stage where they are. And I'm not surprised that it has reached that stage. Negotiation then will have to be done. You know, what I'm surprised about is that Mr. Granger hasn't been reported as saying anything in all of this. I don't recall, I think he did congratulate Mr. Aubrey Norton, but with this position of opposition leader, where he, Mr. Granger, has the say as the leader of the list, I'm surprised that he hasn't called in Norton and Harmon to have this matter resolved. Because in the final analysis, he will have to resolve the matter. He will have to sit there with the 2 men and resolve it. Norton attempted to meet with Harmon, but Harmon is ill, and I spoke with Aubrey this morning. He said they will have another meeting, but there seems to be progress. Those are his words to me. So all I can do is sit and wait.
Adam, as things stand, what does Mr. Harmon and implicitly and perhaps explicitly Henry address this question, but I'm putting it to you. What does Mr. Harmon or Mr. Granger have to gain from dragging this thing out and not saying, look, I'm no longer the leader of the PNC. I got these positions because of the PNC. I am stepping aside and let the PNC fill this position. What does Mr. Granger and by extension Mr. Harmon have to gain by not taking that route?
Good question. I don't think it's a question of having anything to gain. I think it's a question of gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
In the run-up to the elections at Congress, Norton was quoted as saying certain things, you know. He was quoted as saying, after he won the elections, I will have to recall some members of parliament and all of that. That was unfortunate because at the time he wasn't in a position to do that. So when he said that, obviously you would have a reaction. And I suspect that Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon would have reacted to that statement. So I think Aubrey will have to take a backward step, and with advice from a couple of people. He has advisors. He has Valda Lawrence, Richard Van Westcharles, Geeta Chandan, the General Secretary. Well, she hasn't been in the party that long, but Valda was there from God knows how long, WRSM, and all of that. And I think he should have them use their influence to resolve this matter. Because I think Adriana said Freddie claimed that this will drag on into 2025. The PNC don't drag out nothing too long because it would hurt them. I think the matter would be resolved. It should have been resolved already, but I expect it to be resolved within a month, and that's really stretching it. But to answer your question, Harmon and Granger have nothing to gain.
Let me come back to you and ask you directly. Again, Adam hints this, and as a good journalist, he used choice words. Um, is it that these people decide, look, we're going to stick to Norton? You beat us. We were humiliated, but we have this card, and we are going to show you that we can make life difficult for you. Do you think that's what's happening here, Henry? Your audio.
Adam told us, although he started by saying there's nothing to lose, he ended up showing us that there are things to lose. Because he's saying essentially these people don't want to lose being MP, and Norton said he's left to change some of them. That's what you said. And effectively, Norton didn't even have to say that. They should expect it. They should expect when a new leader come in and he makes his decision, anybody can go. That's the nature of politics. You are not an MP to stay there like a bureaucrat. You are an MP to take a walk when the new leader walks in. If a new president comes, he wants his own people. All the ministers got to take a walk and let the president choose who's his thing. So if that is what is the problem, I would be even more astonished. Because what you are saying to me, you have politicians that are not politicians. They want permanent positions. That's exactly what you're saying. And that if you are a politician, ministers are not even, ministers are self-employed according to our constitution. So you can't go nowhere. When the president knocks you off, you just gotta take it. When you end up when you go to parliament, you are there at the behest of, in our case, not of the constituents that sent you necessarily, but of the party. When people voting for parties, these people, it is not a question of no change management. It is a question of you must understand that you got that position here. Jeffrey was made a minister by the PPP government. There's no change management necessary when the president tell you must take a walk. The voters in the PNC says to Mr. Harmon and to Mr. Thing, you are no longer in the leadership positions that you are supposed to be. Take a walk, regroup, and come back. This is not about law. That is how they got there. This is not a no change management about anything going and taking long time. That should be in your head as a politician. I'm going to, or I am a minister. I can be sacked overnight. That to go by the people or by the president. The president will understand too that he can be sacked overnight by the people, either populists in the populist or the party can get together and tell him, take a walk. This is what happens. This gonna take long with no nothing. What they are doing is totally unacceptable. It needs no bureaucracy between anything to deal with it. It is totally unacceptable. Me, I'm telling you in terms, and I do not believe, and furthermore, I do not believe necessarily that Aubrey should go to any parliament. You know my position on parliament. I've said it's a nonsense place. And I've just said, effectively, no, it pays you and so on, but it's essentially a nonsense place. They don't do nothing there. Effectively, I put a quote, say it's a place for idle people. But the essence why I'm saying so, not because of that, but because the PNC got to sit down and say, and Mr. Harmon and Mr. Granger should sit down and say, where are we going from here? What is it that we have to fight for? And if they seriously consider what is it that they have to struggle for, they will soon realize that they can't be organized. They can't get it through parliament. They will have to mobilize in various ways to get it. And there is no better mobilizer in that party today than Aubrey Norton. So that's why I said my thing wouldn't to be removing Harmon from nowhere, but this had to be a discussion. You have to accept first that this position I can take. But Harmon can't do what Norton can do. Norton can do what Harmon can do. Norton can go in there and talk nonsense and talk all day and let people carry it here, and the PPP would love it because the PPP don't care about parliament. They look like they care about parliament. But when he's on the street, when he's mobilizing the groups, when he's doing that, that is terror for them. That's terror for any opposition side. The best man should be doing that. That I would say that essentially that is what Aubrey should have been thinking. But you got to work out a plan. There's no plan. You are just coming, the position vacant or could be vacant. All right, make it vacant. I want it and you want it. Why you want it? What point for the party? What point for Guyana? Why? Are you the best man for it? Is there something better that you can do? That is the kind of discourse you gotta have. And I wouldn't have moved Harmon from there necessarily. I would have, and if I had the choice between Aubrey, because Aubrey can do what Harmon is doing. He been in parliament, he know to do that. Anybody can do that. Get off in parliament. The problem is Aubrey got street sense. Aubrey is on the streets. People know him on the streets and the party more than anybody else. He's going to waste a third of his time in any parliament you sent him, when he could have been in every backyard and every place doing party work and developing the party and all of that. So that's my position.
Right. But as you said, this principle of it, Leaton here says, Henry is on to the naked truth. Henry is on to the naked truth. Adriana, was Aubrey Norton, can Aubrey Norton be faulted if he assumed that having attained office, that the brothers would resign and allow him to choose who he wants to represent the party as the head in parliament? Was he foolish to assume that that would have happened seamlessly?
I think that it's an assumption that he probably has, but he needs to put a process in place. Nothing just
No. But before you go on to that, was he naive to think that the men were just going to hand in their resignations and he chooses?
I think he was a little naive to not, because Aubrey Norton knows David Granger and Joseph Harmon much more than I do, and I knew from what my deductions that they were not going to give up just like that. Nobody gives up power, especially if they think that they
and what is the rationale that you use to arrive at that conclusion?
The rationale I use is because when they were okay, the PNC had engaged, I think, in a very transparent process for the leadership. There was equity in that process. Mr. David Granger, Mr. Aubrey Norton, Mr. Van West Charles, and Mr. Harmon, they all had an equal opportunity to go to the nomination stage. Mr. Granger did not succeed past that nomination stage. The rest all had an equal opportunity to go to the stage of the to be elected. Mr. Aubrey Norton has defeated Mr. Harmon at the stage of the elections. Mr. Harmon, after that process was followed, it was an equitable process, it was a transparent process. Why didn't Mr. Harmon resign immediately? Or why didn't he meet with Mr. Norton to discuss the way forward? So those for me were some early indications that Mr. Harmon was not going to give up this position readily. When I listened to Comrade Ramjitan last week, I think last week or earlier this week, and I listened to Comrade Ramjitan points, I realized that there is more to Joseph Harmon being remaining as leader of the opposition. I didn't quite understand the AFC. I'm getting to your point. I didn't quite understand the AFC because I was asking myself, how is it that the AFC had issues with the David Granger and the Joseph Harmon leadership in government to the point where they were always complaining? And then the AFC had an issue when the vice chairman for Region 4 was selected under the same Harmon and Granger leadership. And then the AFC even brought a no confidence motion against the chairman of Region 4. So I started to think that there must be more to this whole situation, because how is it that the AFC was now fighting to keep the same leadership that they had an issue with? The way I interpret it is that the PNC understands that there were issues at the level of the PNC. Now the PNC is taking steps to remedy that leadership situation. And AFC is now saying that we want the same status quo to remain. So those were some of the...
Piano. Mr. Ramjatan has walked back his statement after the rest of his executive roasted him. And he said that all he was doing was making a legal opinion, was giving a legal opinion. So he just walked back in fairness. Just walk back what he said.
Well, I'm happy that he did, because it had created a lot of confusion, and in terms of also the duplicity and the ambiguity with which they perhaps, well, now I can say Mr. Ramjitan, not necessarily the AFC, right, was approaching the matter. So to answer your question, those were some of the indications earlier and then up to this week that this is not going to be a walk in the park for Aubrey Norton.
Adam, you are a man with your ears on the ground. Verbally, of course. Do you think this is further alienating the base? What's happening among the ordinary people watching this scenario?
The ordinary people want to see Norton as the leader. And traditionally, the leader was the leader was the boss. The leader is the man who called the shots. Aubrey Norton is the man who must call all the shots. So the people at the base want to see him at the head, hence leader of the opposition and all of that. That's at the base. Now, this kind of situation is going to alienate some people. You got people, and we've seen it in the communication, who are angry that Mr. Harmon is still there. But Henry made the point that as opposition leader, Harmon is perhaps the better person to be there because of what he can do. And given the state of the party, Aubrey would be better outside doing all the organizing and what have you to support. However, it seems as though the general council of the party is saying, hey, we want Aubrey as opposition leader. So that's where we there now.
Mhm.
So what we got to do, we got to convince Joe that, look, boy, let Aubrey take this thing. But even if he convinces Harmon, you still have the Granger thing there. Will Granger put Aubrey in parliament? So unless Aubrey goes to parliament, he can't be the opposition leader.
Right.
So it's a very peculiar situation. And that is why I think Henry said that there should be, and Adriana too, there should be a lot of discussion. Plenty. They got a lot of things you got to look at. A whole lot of things. A whole lot of personalities.
Yeah.
And so that's where we are. That's where we are.
Yeah. And I'm very glad you raised that point explicitly, Adam, because for me, the issue is not Harmon, the issue is Granger. Because Granger holds the key. He is
Right.
the leader of the list.
Correct.
Granger will have to recall somebody, put Aubrey in parliament, and then resign his position, and the caucus then say, we have confidence in Norton to become.
That's
Dr. Hines, but Dr. Hines, can I make
Yes.
this point? You
Yes.
also have a situation here, to come to what Adam has said. You have two senior persons, Mr. Granger as the head of the list, the representative of the list, and Mr. Harmon as the leader of the opposition. The party they claim to represent, they do not have any position of authority. So this is where I think that is a big problem, because how can Mr. Granger remain as the representative of the list when he does not have the authority to speak on behalf of his party? How can Mr. Harmon remain the leader of the opposition when he does not have the authority? Now they would have to go to Aubrey Norton as the leader and the central executive to get authority. So this is the way I see it. So yeah, a quick point on that too is that I think that people respond to authority. Aubrey Norton does not necessarily need Mr. Granger, Mr. Harmon to like him, but they need to respect him, and he has to earn that respect. So I would say that Aubrey Norton, I have a different view to Dr. Jeffrey, that Aubrey Norton should be in parliament. But perhaps how it could be done is that he should be in parliament as the leader of the opposition. And I would say, don't let Mr. Harmon give up his seat, but let him have a role of perhaps as parliamentary coordinator, parliamentary and governance coordinator. So in that sense, he can be the shadow minister to the parliamentary affairs minister and the minister of governance. And but he's not the leader of the opposition. So he still has an important role, but he's not the leader of the opposition. In addition to that, they can also co-opt him into the secretarial executive. But Mr. Norton will have the leader of the opposition position. He would be in parliament. How will he get there? I'll stop here for now.
Yeah. Right.
All
You preempted what was going to be my next question. So you've answered, because the next question, the question I was going to ask is, in negotiation with Harmon / Granger, what are you going to give them? Because in negotiation, you have to give and take, right? I mean, what are you going to give Mr. Harmon that he doesn't walk away humiliated because politicians got thin skin. People floated the idea. I myself floated the idea of him taking the position of the chief whip, which is essentially number two on the opposition side. Some people said that they might have held back on the general secretary position and offered that to him or somebody who supported him. Henry, assuming that they're going to have negotiations, what could they offer to the Harmon Granger faction for them to think? Your audio, your audio, your audio, your audio. We're not hearing. Yeah.
Are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you now. So go back because you were quite animated when you started.
I would offer them a no confidence vote. That is what I would offer them. You don't walk, no confidence. This is not a discourse anymore. You have no authority. If you want to go down that road, go down. You must walk. Because this is not about any negotiation. You have lost the right to any negotiations. You negotiated with the membership of the PNC, and they told you to walk. You must walk. What negotiated? No, I won. And therefore, you must walk. And if you don't walk, we will use the same authority that gives you all the authority you claim you have to give you a no confidence motion. You got 23 to their thing. And the AFC and this smaller party better. The AFC would not join with Granger and anybody for this because it can't serve them any good. It would not be of any good to them. And you want to negotiate. What are you going to negotiate? You should know, as I said before, when people vote against you, you got to walk. This is not anything about negotiating. This is not about people don't give up power. Nobody's asking you to give up power. You lose it in something you accept. This is not like people trying to take power from you. This is you lose. You went to election. You say, I'll walk. You got to walk. This is disappointing. And you know what's more disappointing? That we are buying into this nonsense that they have some right to negotiate, and they have none. They have none. They're politicians. They have none. And if you got a thing like a no confidence motion, go for it. That is why I would have offered them. Give it to them.
Adam, I hope you didn't go to make notes there for Prime News because
No.
You have some news there tonight.
No. No, my grandson called. No.
What's your take on that? Should they negotiate? What they should have to do?
I can't be as vehement as Henry. I got away. I believe in talking and talking. First of all, the party came out a bit fragmented after losing the elections. We see resignations. Simona Broom's claim that she quitting because of something. All of that happening. So I got this position, rather than broke up, let me try to hug up and talk quietly. I know for a fact that negotiation is the key. Should we have negotiations with David Granger? Because when all is said and done, he holding the key at the moment as the leader of the list, although he is, and he hasn't resigned from Parliament. I don't think he didn't go into Parliament.
No, he didn't go into Parliament.
Right. But he's the leader of the list. Excuse them nice out there. Now, but we need to talk to him. Joe, as leader of the opposition, and there's something Henry can help me with. Does he have the power to recall members? Does Joe have that power?
No, Joe doesn't have that power. That power lies with David Granger, the leader of the list.
So the big thing about it then, rather than Aubrey talking to Joe, should be talking to Granger.
Yes, Granger's the man with the key. Granger's the man with the key. On that note, we'll take a short break. I promised to play that little Hindi thing for you all. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, We're going to continue this animated discussion on the Norton Harmon Saga, but Adam has suggested, and I feel very strongly, it's really the Norton Granger Saga rather than Harmon. But we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Got my Lord teach it again.
We are one Guyana, place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world.
सकती हूँ सबब में लोगों से प्यार करने की
So amazed to live in such a beautiful country with loving people in harmony. I'm so amazed to live in such a beautiful country with loving people in harmony.
A place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world.
Yeah, some are we born on the hills, some on the low coastal plains. Plenty rice and sugar cane, same Guyanese blood in our vein. So make we burn out the hatred, time for erasing. Can't make that destroy. 6 races I share the same space in this 83,000 square miles.
We are one Guyana.
Thank you and welcome back to Politics 101. We continue our discussion on the Norton Harmon Granger Saga. Gentlemen and lady, before we took the break, Henry vehemently said that he doesn't feel that that Norton should waste time in Parliament. But let me put this to you. Isn't Parliament, to use one of the American terms, can the Parliament be used as a bully pulpit for Aubrey Norton? That his presence in Parliament would give him another platform to do what Henry says, which is to really mobilize and lift the morale of his people. The other thing is that because of the less than sterling, or what people feel was the less than sterling performance of the members of Parliament and the opposition side, and as Henry says, it's not their fault, but people feel that they have not been doing a good job. Could Norton's presence in the National Assembly help to give the people, the supporters of the PNC, some feeling that at least the Parliament is an area that you can do a little bit of struggle? In effect, what I'm asking, can Aubrey Norton change the perception that the Parliament is not a place to fight? And I'll start with you, Adriana. Your audio.
The reason I started off with the change management approach It's because we assume that things will happen. I agree with Dr. Jeffrey that you should not negotiate. But what would you do? Would you go and lift Mr. Granger, Mr. Harmon, and remove them? You need a process to do that, and that's where the change management comes in. I agree with Adam to some extent that to have the dialogue. So what I would suggest, I'm in between. So what I would suggest is that Mr. Norton starts the process. To write
Yeah, but Adriana, what I'm asking is what usefulness, Henry has raised the point that is hell being an opposition in parliament. You really don't have any power. It's just as if you're not there. What I'm asking, could Norton's presence in a situation where the opposition doesn't have power, but the sheer force of his personality, can that be of any benefit to opposition sense and opposition morale?
While I understand what Dr. Jeffrey is saying, I still believe, even if it's in the normative sense, in the functional sense, Dr. Jeffrey might be right. But in the normative sense, Aubrey Norton, as the leader of the PNC, should be the leader of the opposition and in parliament. And like I said to you, people respond to authority. I cannot see Mr. Joseph Harmon, just an ordinary member in the PNC, remaining as the leader of the opposition. Aubrey Norton, fair enough, he's co-opted, he has Dr. Van West Charles as advisor. He can do some of the mobilization. Aubrey Norton doesn't necessarily have to do all of the mobilization, but I believe that he needs to be in parliament as the leader of the opposition. And like I said, it's a part of him earning that respect as the leader.
But what does he bring? What does he bring to a situation that he doesn't have the institutional power to make any change? What does his presence there
his
do
presence
for the opposition?
Here, I think what he brings is that authority. Currently, Mr. Harmon does not have a mandate from the central executive of the People's National Congress reform. And I want to stick to, so Mr. Harmon can say something in Parliament right now as an ordinary member, and the central executive can say that we don't agree with it. So even if it's not then Aubrey Norton as the leader of the opposition, you need somebody. I don't think there's ever been a situation where you've had a leader of the opposition who did not hold a position of authority in the party that they're representing.
Got you. Adam, what does Aubrey's presence in parliament do for opposition morale? If at all.
Parliament is one of the places where you tend to get a lot of publicity. Your voice is heard. Whatever you say is recorded. Aubrey, at his press conferences, has been saying a lot. In Parliament, he will have a bigger voice, and as Adriana says, he will be endowed with a position of power. Is that the right word? I don't know. A position of strength. And the people outside, the grassroots and all of that, would hear him even more than they are hearing him now. So he has a place in Parliament. I think he also has a place as leader of the opposition. I can't get away from that. But how does he get there? That was the focus of the whole thing during this discussion. I mean, it's not a case that Granger can step aside and say, Aubrey, come, because they had a problem before. So I really don't know. Yes, Aubrey would have a bigger voice to his supporters if he goes into Parliament. He would have that voice. You can't get away from that. But he needs to get there.
Right. Henry, despite your pessimism, justifiable pessimism about the opposition in Parliament, I said being in the opposition is hell. That was a quote from the late Owen Arthur, who was talking about the opposition. He said it hell being in the opposition in Westminster majoritarian system. But in spite of that, can Aubrey Norton use the Parliament to score some big points outside of the Parliament?
Score it out. Let me ask you something. Seriously, all of us brought up in this, and I'm not surprised. I think most people, they believe that this Parliament and being a parliamentarian, because as Adam says, half the fight must be because Norton said that you're going to take away some people from Parliament. So effectively, people actually believe this thing. They're bought into the formalism of the Westminster system. They think it's good. It's not good for our country. Who is going to, which bigger voice he will have? How? They don't have big voice there. And look what happened to the bill. Anything happened, they have to try all sorts of things, and still nothing happened in Parliament. What I'm saying to you is that Harmon, I'm not saying Harmon can just be a nobody and go in Parliament. I'm saying that if in any configuration of a discussion of where the party is going, you got to decide. This is not just running in a body because it's there. It's going in a body for a distinct purpose. Now, your purpose, you will have to get serious mobilization for what's going to meet you in the next couple of years. Aubrey, not very few people, I don't know about anybody in the PNC, can essentially do what he can do. Go in the Parliament, wasting a third of your time talking. Who he talking to? The same people he could talk to. Essentially, he was out of Parliament. This thing that Parliament is a bully pulpit, it's good for an homogeneous country in which you can sway people all over the place. It's not good for you. You can talk how much you like about corruption. Any party ever lose vote because of corruption? And all day, oh, this one corrupt, oh, Orphan corrupt, Orphan is president. You're just wasting time. You must know when you're wasting time. You live in a different kind of ethnic society in which you live in. In Barbados, fine, it's a bully pulpit because you got a substantial, in terms of percent, a swing vote. You ain't got that here. Essentially, you have to go on the ground and mobilize your people. All this thing about what we all grew up, we heard about it. Desmond, how long it took him to start realizing the thing will work. Even after he drew the Janet Jagan to constitutional reform, he's still with this thing. It took him till what, 2004 to say this thing ain't gonna work by.
Yeah.
We got another system.
2002 after lunch, we are not negotiating as equals.
Things come your mind. People got you want to run around talking about bill and all that, but anytime you start talking about governance, who rules, they don't even want to put it in the press. They will get you talking about this one thieving, this one doing this one there, this one thing. He's about it. Does change anybody mind? Anybody cares in any substantial way to change rules? And it's easy. When you hear people doing analysis of government, you got massive election manipulating out there. So you can't do no numbers, but this number's changed and this group has went. You don't know if 5,000 people are not even here vote and there's only a part of the sexual. And don't say it doesn't happen. So it happened in the Maldives, where 5,000 people, almost the same number, vote and the court throw the government. Because so don't say it can happen. I know we have nice ballot bar, people can't do it. It happens. It happened here. Any analysis that fails to take it into consideration, a false analysis talking about, we had this vote move from this side and all that sort of nonsense. Effectively, you had mass manipulation. Even to 2015, Donald Robinson was saying the PNC rigged the last election. You know that? I couldn't say nothing. I used to just quote them. I quote him and Bart saying that PNC rig election. I never said a rig or not rig because I didn't know. They should know. But I can say now that the election manipulating, I got numbers on the ground that the PPP is running from every day in every court. They don't want you to challenge it.
And the police, as you remind us, the police got those numbers.
Give up this formalism and niceness about the system in which we live. It is not a good system for Guyana. It is not. It is attempting to change itself. Remember, you got two shots at this here. You got one shot saying that, look, boss, it's better we sit down together and run this country together. Because if it's 70 years we're messing around with it and it's going nowhere, look where we are. It must be not more divided now than ever. All right, if you can't do that and sit down, the system itself, because of migration and so on, is changing. But these parties are preventing it from changing by manipulating elections. And you got to stop that. And Aubrey got to stop that. And he has to go out there doing all this thing about parliament. What's it, parliament? You can go, this is a small country. You got umpteen media all over the place. You need that for anybody, for the leader of the PNC, particularly if he's doing things on the ground that mobilizing people. That's for homogeneous society that it makes a difference. It makes one difference here.
Dr. Hines, can I just add one slight point? The other reason why Aubrey needs to go to parliament and become the leader of the opposition is because Guyana, the geopolitics of oil, has already internationalized Guyana in a way that I don't think we have imagined. The opposition is the government in waiting. As we have seen with the Commonwealth Secretary General who came, met with the opposition, the leader of the opposition, but the leader of the opposition office. She met with Mr. Royce Ford, I learned. And then she met also with Mr. Aubrey Norton. Now, if those positions can be consolidated, then I see Aubrey Norton as the leader of the PNC and as the leader of the largest party. I think it's important. The position of the leader of opposition is going to help him to make some connections, to make some, it's going to simplify that process as against like what happened with in the case of the Commonwealth Secretary General, where she had to meet with two bodies. And I thought that was very strategic. It was good thinking. What it says to me is that the international community understands our situation perhaps better than we think they do. So that was a big point. So I think those are some of
that's a false point. You know what happened? You know what happened in 2015 after Carter come here? Carter, after he called them to say talk to the PPP, he said he wanted to talk to Jagdeo. You know why? Because he knows Jagdeo is the boss. You think anybody don't know who's the boss in a country? You could have gone to Russia. Burnham went to Russia and they let him meet Kosygin and all of them, but he knows the boss. The boss was the secretary, the general secretary of the party. He want to meet Brezhnev. And I don't think he ever met Brezhnev. So don't worry about this nicety. They know who's the boss. If they really want something serious and she come here, she would have said to the PNC, can you add in your delegation, Mr. Norton, please? Because they know Harmon ain't got no power on the ground. You think she coming out to waste your time with Harmon? That's not how international government works. They know who got power on the ground. They're going to come here and Harmon, even before they come, they're going to tell you they want. So don't worry this thing. That, I'm telling you, the formalism we get caught up in. And we have been brought up in it for decades. We go to school. I don't even think they got proper class at UG. Maybe I can partly be blamed for that teaches these things in this way.
Yeah.
Consociationalism and all that.
Right. All right, I was just looking at some of the comments there. We are running down on time. Let me throw this out here. It's too early for us to make any definitive assessment of what Mr. Norton has done. So we will have to confine it to what the songs that he has been making, the chords that he has been pulling. Adam, Are you encouraged by what you've been hearing from him?
Yes, I have been. I have been. In the first place, he's trying to get a lot of the party members who ended up on the sideline. He wants to get them active again. And Henry made the point about, Parliament could be a waste of time. Henry, you remember when the PNC used to got hordes of people outside public buildings? It made those ministers uncomfortable, especially when the speaker being broadcast, what they're saying out there. They were uncomfortable.
You make my point. You just made my point. Or being there for hordes of people be outside.
No,
or
but
we don't have to be inside for, and that would make the point even better. That he's not even there on hordes of people outside. You made my point. It's the hordes of people now they're talking stupidness inside.
Point taken. But I still think that if he's in there, it would have a little more meaning. Unless you want him in the crowd.
No, maybe he can be in the crowd. He can be in Barbies, mobilizing more people to come down on the road. That would make an hit. He's not in there talking foolishness that nobody care about.
Henry, positive songs coming from Norton in the first couple of weeks?
Well, I have spoken to Mr. Norton a couple of times. Meet him, Aubrey all over the place. This is not no meeting. This is meeting him by a drink and this thing. And even before then, he made good songs about building his party and so on. And I, rebuilding the party, and I believe that is of primary importance. And of talking with people. I asked him, when we met, I'm going to tell you this, I asked him, I said, why don't you speak to Joe? He says, boss, I'm trying to meet Joe to speak to him. I'm trying to get these people to talk, but they're running all over the place. Now, this is unacceptable behavior. Totally unacceptable. And so I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because he seemed to be making a genuine effort to try to go forward, try to discourse. I am not saying, when I put my thing on the table, I am not saying Joe should be or Obi shouldn't be. I am saying Norton must have the right to determine who is. If he determines Joe must be, Joe will be. If he say he want to be, let him be. I think it's going to be a disadvantage to his organization, but that is my view. But he must have the right to make that determination because all of them, every single one of them, that Joe and Granger and all of them, they had the position they have because the PNC who voted Norton in voted them in too. And to now it vote them out, they must go and pick up their briefcase and go home or come and discourse and say, well, look, Chief, you win. Let me have a discourse. If there's anything that I can do, these are my projects. These are my position. I cannot see Granger or Harmon doing anything to help their political life. Well, Granger's political life is over. But Harmon doing anything to help his political life by doing what he's doing now. Nothing.
As we move to Adriana to get our take on what she's hearing and from Mr. Norton, one of my Bostonians here, Mr. Henry Jeffrey, you uneasy. Go ahead, Adriana. your song.
Dr. Hines, before I comment on what I'm hearing from him, I'd like to say that just to follow up on Dr. Jeffrey's point, then if it is that Mr. Harmon and Mr. Granger should leave, what I would suggest is that the central executive and the leader of the PNC write Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon and request that they prepare to hand over their positions to the new leader and see how they react to that. Because you have to start the process somewhere. So there must be, so when I talk about the transition, I was thinking that this transition should not be beyond the 29th of February. So what I would suggest is that Mr. Aubrey and Norton and the Central Executive, they meet and they agree that they will write Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon and request that they prepare to hand over as chairman of APNU, hand over as representative of the list, hand over as leader of the opposition, and let them respond to that. And the other point, and let them respond to that tell them by the 31st of January. So you put a timeline to that. This transition period, depending on how they respond, then the Central Executive and Mr. Norton will know how to follow up. But the transition should not last beyond the end of February. But I think that in all these discussions that we're talking, the Central Executive and the new leader needs to be very clear with Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon about their intention and what they would like them to do. To say what I'm hearing from Mr. Norton, I am hearing some positive things. I hear them talk about having a work plan, which will do all the mobilization and the refocusing of the party and the restructuring and so on. But before they get there, they have to deal with this whole issue that they have. They need stability in order to grow. The other last point that I would like to make is in terms of, if there's one caution I will give at this point to Mr. Norton and the Central Executive is, I see he's been already meeting with the other parties. He's met with the WPA. He's invited the Justice for All party to meet, to be a part of the APNU. But the way in which this is going, Mr. Norton doesn't even know if the PNC will remain under the APNU. So I'd like to end at that point.
And on that, yes. These boxing women, bad day tonight. Here, one of them, get out of the way, Joe, and good night. Get out of the way, Joe, and good night. Are you bad? That's why I'm glad I'm from Buxton. All right, it's been quite a program, and the comments and the interaction from the audience. Marvin Williams, PNC man, he says Henry Jeffrey, with the party leader out of parliament and a leader of the opposition on the inside, with hordes of people outside, essentially subordinates the party leader and causes him to appear to be in service to of the leader of the opposition. That is not good for the coalition, in my view. So, you know, people are locked into this discourse here tonight, and I myself have thoroughly enjoyed moderating this discussion. Clearly, is something that animates all of us one way or the other, and you guys have really brought some light. Closing thoughts, starting with you, Adam Harris.
Closing thought is that Adriana gave them a whole month. You know, I don't think at the stage the party is, you need a month. I think at this stage, and it would be nice to have Mr. Granger summon this meeting with Norton and Harmon. I don't think Aubrey should be running behind them. You know, please, no, come, let me do this because of. I don't think that should happen. Mr. Granger should listen to the voice of the party, comrades, and summon the meeting with Harmon, Aubrey, and himself there. And if Aubrey wants to work with some members, advisors, he should be able to. He should be able to. And let's get this matter resolved. Because while this nonsense going on, the PPP enjoying itself. Stabrook News wrote a story about asking the president how you select in this NRF board. And he gave them some cock and bull story without answering the question. In short, he's comfortable in his own skin. He sat down and he said, I'm the president, I can do what I want. I think we should create a situation where the opposition has a very strong and united voice, so you know that he ain't gonna do what you want all the time. No way.
Adriana, your closing thoughts?
Dr. Hines, just to respond to Adam quickly. Adam, Mr. Granger knew that the PNC, our constitution says that every 2 years they will have Congress, and that the possibility exists that at this last Congress that passed, the leader could have been changed. And so when he accepted the position as leader, he knew those were the terms and conditions in the constitution. That did not come up recently. So therefore, I agree with Dr. Jeffrey when he's saying that there's no right, so to speak. But I was just trying to suggest a process. I'd like to end by this, Dr. Hines, by saying that we also need to give the PNC space to some amount of conflict is good. I think some amount of this is good, but they, like I said, they have to manage the change. They have to, I was going to say not let it get out of control, but I think it's already out of control. But I still think that we still need to not necessarily expect them to be perfect through this transition period. It could get nasty, and I think as not just as I'm saying, we not necessarily referring to supporters and members, but also as a country to understand that the process could get nasty, but it has to be managed.
And there you have it. Before I go to Dr. Jeffrey for his closing thoughts, this is another them Buxton woman, Grandpa and Uncle Joe, you all need to do the utmost thing. Go on home. They done farm tonight. Joe Boy, he was my friend. But if you're listening, it's tough out there. It's really tough out there, boy. Any closing thoughts?
My closing thought is that all of this we are seeing is the outcome of a very transparent democratic process. This is not somebody there with some democratic centralism sitting down in a little office and determining who become and who not become. And this will be messy at times. If you want that, well, then perhaps you can go to the PPP. They got that operating down there. Today, it's not going to become too messy. So it's part of a democratic process that it's always out there somewhere. And if you think you won't keep it in, somebody's going to carry it out. So I see this as part of a process of development of a democratic thing. The PNC is obviously the most democratic party in this country today. But more than that, more importantly, is that Adriana said that something, you have to solve this before you move forward and so on. I don't think so. I think Norton is the leader of the PNC, and he better start doing the work that he has to do to make his party strong and think. You don't have to wait to solve this confusion to think. It is important to solve it, but he mustn't pander to the press with this, because they can pay it more for the PVP and all that if they want. So effectively, he must go forward, organize his party, create a new vision. He got to give the Guyanese people a vision, and he can give them a vision that is inclusive of all people. He can do that. He can give them a vision. He can get his various committees. He setting up committees and interlocking committees that are focusing on one thing. Don't make when you put together a committee and it starts a chairman, they must focus on one thing. Don't get carried away with an NRF bill, this, that. Focus on one single issue and drive it forward. I'm not saying you mustn't know about these things, but I'm saying focus. And in every week you can have, if you got 6 committees, almost every week, if you do that, one of them can come up with something for you to be in public domain and so on. But he needs not to make this big and all and do all of things and paying too much attention or all his attention to this crap that is going on, He needs to organize his party so that in the meantime, when they solve this, they solve it, but the party is going forward. That's what he needs to do.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, former lecturer at the University of Guyana, an author and member of parliament himself at one point, and government minister, Adriana Thomas, consultant and political activist. and the evergreen Adam Harris. Been around a long time. He has seen it all. And I want to say what a discussion.
David, can I make a point to you? David, can I make a point to you? I was never a member of parliament when I was not a minister.
Okay, you were a technocrat then in the parliament.
I was never a member of parliament. I was a member of parliament for 17 years, but for 17 years as a minister. The minute I was not a minister anymore, I given both resignations. Because I had no time to waste.
All right, no time to waste. No time to waste. What a discussion. I mean, would you believe that there was disagreement tonight on this program? But yet, we brought it to the end without any blood. Perhaps that's an example to the politicians of how to have a great discussion even when you disagree. Adriana's given us up until this month end to solve this problem. So I'm committed to bring back this panel at month end to see where we are on this issue. Thank you all very much. Thanks,
Thank you very much.
My brothers. Thanks, my sister.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Hines.
Yes. And tomorrow night, we are going to be talking economic development and oil. We're gonna have a young Low. He's a sharp economist, young man. He worked at Sarah, and I think he worked in the office of the leader of the opposition. His last name is Low. He's going to be on tomorrow night, along with Eric Phillips. They're going to be talking about the oil and gas industry and development or underdevelopment in Guyana. We are also going to have, in the first segment, Vincent Alexander telling us about that firing of the personal assistant of Keith Lowenfield today. And Vincent walked out in disgust. We're going to get more of that from Vincent tomorrow night. And then we're going to talk oil and development with two experts. So another big show in the making for tomorrow. Always stay good, sleep tight, and see you all tomorrow evening.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.